this conference. So my name is Sreenivasul Reddy, Meegada. So I work for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan as a technical lead and then a solutions architect. So today's session is to cover about the voice biometrics in the healthcare, right? And how secure the voice biometrics is and how can we streamline the workflows with the new voice biometrics technology to the healthcare, right? The healthcare organizations enter in the world like facing a crisis, right? So they have a lot of data breaches, everything that's getting breached, as we all know what is happening in the market, and moreover, the data breaches compromising millions of patients' records, right? So if you all will be surprised to see like how much the data breaches, why healthcare, and when compared with the banks, right? So if you look at in the black market, right, whereas for the general card information, the credit card information, if it's like $5, but whereas the black market, so the healthcare record, each record is around like $250, right? So it will be very surprised to or shocking to know that information, but it's accurate, right? So that's why most of the cyber criminals target the healthcare industry. So that's where we need to ensure we have right security and also we are maintaining all the security models in the healthcare to ensure the data related to the user is accurately available, right? So we don't want any breaches into the healthcare environment. So with that said, so let's go into more details, right? So the next one is what is the need? Why? What is the critical need, and why do we need that in the enhanced like with the in the healthcare security, right? So as I mentioned earlier, right? So cyber criminals are targeting the healthcare industry. So because some of the open challenges is like users having the weak authentication processes and the practices and password base, which is very inadequate to protect, right? It's an older way of authenticating, right? And when it comes to unique challenges, right? So healthcare operations are very high pressure environments, right? So where it has access to the critical information, so life, death, and everything. So all of this information, so the clinicians required, and whenever like it needs to be secure, right? So these emergency situations like where traditional authentication creates dangerous delays, right? And some of the senior consequences is like medical identity theft can lead to incorrect treatments and also some of the insurance frauds. Unauthorized access can result in the altering the stolen records, right? And also prescriptions or disrupt critical care operations. So with that said, let's go to the next slide, which is the evaluation of biometrics totally in the healthcare industry, specifically to the authentication. So the biometric authentication represents a fundamental shift from the knowledge-based security, right? So if you look at the current market or a current environment where majority of the people are wanted to have the knowledge-based authentication, right? So we're having the contact numbers, date of birth, zip codes, all of that data as a security, right? But if you all look at it, like some of the data is already available in the internet, right? So anyone would be able to pull the data and will be able to authenticate or as you, right? So that's where we need to we need to ensure like we have some new methods of authenticating in the healthcare, right? So there's a different types of biometrics, right? Like the fingerprints, which is leveraged in the some of the pharmacy accesses, and at the same time you have the facial recognitions and also iris scanning in the same way like a palm vein authentication, right? But out of all of these, so the interesting one would be like voice biometrics. So it has there's a significant changes in the voice biometrics technology, which is currently leveraged in majority of the organizations, which can be leveraged for authenticating the members or authenticating the employees within the healthcare and streamlining the workflows using the standard voice of the customer. So the advantage of these is the customer doesn't need to carry the traditional contract number, date of birth, or the employee card everywhere, right? So it doesn't need to be carried, right? So some of the key applications which can be leveraged, which of these can be leveraged is like the access control stuff, right? And the same way the fraud prevention and insurance claims, and at the same time voice biometrics in the contact center, right? Some of the benefits of this is like improved security, right? Reduced errors, and also the same like it does streamline the workflows and enhance the patient's trust. At the same time, this is going to have a lot of cost savings in the environment. We understand like when we look at the broader picture, right? So there are some challenges, right? Everything is not like a smooth in the new technology, right? We need to look it from different perspectives, and we also need to understand what are the challenges, right? So some of them will be like some of the privacy concerns, and some of them will be bias and accuracy of the authentication in the healthcare with these adoptions, and there will be some adoption barriers as well, and also at the same time the regulations and standards. So the biometric revolution in healthcare is not about the security, right? It's about creating safer and more personalized and efficient healthcare. So that's where the voice biometrics is getting adopted in the healthcare industry. So we need to understand. So there is a perception of regarding the adoption. Voice biometrics is it might have some of the challenges like fraud, but whereas if you understand this technology more, right? So it's not like a voice print, right? So there's a lot of factors that are taken into consideration when this technology create a voice print. So some of them are like the physiological foundation. So where every individual person have a unique vocal signature, right? So it's vocal card, like articulatory organs. There's a lot of variations in every unique voice, right? There's a pattern. So that's unique to every person. And there is a behavioral pattern, right? So the habits of pronouncing the pattern, like a speech, and intonation that develops over years of language, right? So all of these, including some of the advanced processing behind the scenes, like the modern security systems, will be leveraged, like the fundamental frequency, like the spectral distribution, all of this, including the machine learning, in order to create a voice prints. So this is with all of these patterns, right, or the science of the technology, always the unique voice print will be created for every user, right? So it's not like someone can impersonate my voice. So that is the false accepts would be very less if you use the voice biometric solution, right? So now we also need to look at it from the enterprise scale implementation, the healthcare. So there's a lot of deployments processes available, right? But as we always mention or we always plan to, right, we need to secure the voice to make sure we are going with the right technology in the environment. So some of them, like we have to do some pilot before we migrate to the voice biometrics, like identify all the challenges, because challenges, some of them are unique to the platform, right? And our and our application or our environment or our organization, right? So we need to ensure we learn ahead of time what are those challenges are going to be. So that would be smoother transition of the implementation. And we also need to understand what are the infrastructure preparations, right? What is the network or the bandwidth or what is the redundancy we are going to have? And at the same time, continuing the performance monitoring and the improvements. And change management, right, is very crucial, right? So we need in the environment to make sure we have the right operational efficiency and the patient safety. So the same, if you look at some of the measurable impacts on the clinical operations, so the what are the so the based on a recent survey, right? So with the voice biometric implementation in the clinical operation, there is authentication time reduction of 83%, right? So generally, the knowledge-based authentication, as we previously discussed, so it's more like a traditionally asking, hey, what is your unique ID? What is your date of birth? Or what is your social security? All of that. But with this new voice biometrics technology, so the voice authentication eliminates like manual credential entry. We don't need to enter the manually all the credentials entries, right? So the with the voice biometrics, it's going to leverage your voice to authenticate and then just keep moving. And at the same time, there's also 67% support request reduction, right? Some of them, majority of them are related to the authentication. So where if the clinician or a customer try to authenticate, if their voice is not matching, right? Sorry, if the clinician try to authenticate and some of this credential doesn't work, right? So basically the knowledge base, so majority of them will be calling the customer care. So for the support to look into the issue. But with this voice biometrics, you'll not be running into those challenges, right? So and you have a higher user satisfaction rate. because clinical operations, right? So it's very critical for the in the healthcare, right? So it's more like how much satisfied your healthcare staff is, and at the same time, this will increase the overall efficiency gain in the workflow process. So these are some of the measurable impacts we have noticed in the clinical operations, and at the same time, so we have a lot of platforms or customers or the providers available in the market, right? So we all need to make sure we are going with the right product. So there are multiple products in the market. So we all need to, so whenever there, there's a consideration to migrate to the voice biometrics, we as an organization, we need to take a look at it or assess what are all the products that are available in the market. And at the same time, we need to see what product can work with our applications or the integrations within the IVR, right? Or the self-service, and at the same time the CRMs, which is like the main critical one for the CSRs. So we need to see which product is more reliable and which can provide more accuracy with less false positives, right? So that's the assessment that needs to be done. And we also need to look at which of these providers supports some of the historical enrollments, right? Some of the previously recordings available in the previous platform can be leveraged to enroll the customers or clinicians so that when they call next time, instead of enrolling them again, we can be authenticated, which is trying to gain an efficiency. So at the same time, we need to ensure we are following all the HIPAA compliance, right? So that is main critical for any of the healthcare. So we need to make sure we are following all the HIPAA compliance when we try to integrate the voice biometric solution, right? So the next one is the challenges. So there will be a lot of technical challenges, as we all know, right? None of the product is 100% perfect, right? But we need to see which works for our organization. Some of the technical challenges is the noisy environment, right? So when you try to authenticate, if there is background noise, so then system sometimes you may not be instead of getting a voice match, you may get a voice mismatch, right? Because and at the same time, as we all know, right, during when we are ill or fatigue, right, so our voice will be different little bit. At the same system will might have some challenges in authenticating you. And some of the organization challenges are we need to take a look at it software, like how much the licensing cost is and how much is the training and the expenses and what is that professionals like the workforce disruptions, the migrations, and some of the regulatory challenges is like privacy concerns. Voice biometrics, right? We need to be very careful and in attention to the compliance. Some of the regulatories are HIPAA and BIPA and GDPR. Some of these there are specific requirements. So we need to ensure the organization we involve the privacy and security team when we are coming up with a lot of these strategy discussions. We all need to make sure there is some of the mitigations is right. So we need to balance it out whether we want to do threshold with a high match or whether we wanted to authenticate even if the response came back as medium or a low. So it all depends on how you do the configurations. And we also need to see what the business requirement is and need to look at it like a multi-model authentication, right? Providing some of the backups with the KPAs. And we need to ensure we are following all the right privacy policies and the data requirements and where the data is getting stored. And at the same time, so we also need to look at deploying in a phased approach rather than going in a single deployment. So some of the best practices is pre-rollout assessment. So we need to do we need to be very planning. So some of this planning needs to happen ahead of time, right? So we need to understand what is the conduct comprehensive site surveys, so the infrastructure audits and the user interviews and technical testing to identify potential challenges before implementation and multi-model integration. So we need to ensure some of the backup options are available. So when authentication fails, so in case of voice authentication fails, we need to switch back a failover to knowledge-based authentication without impacting clinical staff or the members or the customers. And then from the deployment perspective, we have to go in a phased approach. So with a very selected department for testing, like a performance. So there'll be opportunity for tuning the application, right? So based on our environment. And at the same time, comprehensive training needs to be performed to all the users so that everyone understand the criticality so that we can have, so the right ROI is returned with the voice with these solutions. And some of the, as I mentioned in earlier, the security and the benefits of the compliance advantages. So it does eliminate the password vulnerabilities. It cannot be easily stolen. So someone cannot take your voice and try to authenticate you as you. So the system would automatically understand whether it's a human talking or it's an automated mission. So at the same time, some of the prevention of the credential sharing, right? So whereas some of the credentials are stolen or shared, so that's where now using the voice makes this a common practice. So now it is like non-repressive capabilities. So it does create an indisputable records of system access, user actions, and the transaction approvals that cannot be disputed. So some of the compliance advantages is, so it does provide a detailed logging for user authentication, like a granular access capabilities, which are required for HIPAA regulation, right? So the technology strong authentication prevents unauthorized access. So in order to meet the compliance reporting. So some of the principles of least privilege system support fine-grained access controls based on the user identity, roles, and the time of access in order to meet the regulatory requirements. So there are some privacy things we need to take into control when we are designing, like making sure the customers are aware, like we are going to leverage their voice for authentication or enrollment. So there are some of the templates which are available, right? So that can be leveraged for as a sample. And global compliance, right? So flexible architecture needs to be planned, required while maintaining consistent security capabilities across the global organization. So some of the future trends and technology advances we are seeing, it's like AI advancements. Where that's the buzzword we are hearing everywhere, right? So there will be a quick learning on the algorithm that is getting uptime, which does improve the voice patterns in order to reduce the false mismatches during the when the user is having an illness or emotional stage. At the same time, like natural language processing, it's like more sophisticated, like reducing the training requirements. And as edge computing, right? So which does relate to the privacy concerns by minimizing any of the data transmission. And IoT, right? Like the integrations, which does monitoring the equipment and ensuring the right controls are available in order to meet the security requirement. And the continuous authentication, right? System continuously verifies whether the users are getting authenticated rightly, or if there is any imposters who are trying multiple times to authenticate or impersonate at the same time, enhancing the technology, right? And the next one is the path forward. So the voice biometrics is a very transformative opportunity, right? In the healthcare industry, the technology is a unique combination of strong authentications, but we need to ensure we are implementing it, the right workflows are getting integrated. And there is evidence up from enterprise scale deployments that efficiency, the security, and the user satisfaction justify the implementation of the investment. However, successful implementation requires careful planning, adequate resources, sustained commitment to address technical challenges, user adoption issues, and regulatory requirements. So voice autonomous deployment is a very comprehensive change, shift from the historical knowledge-based authentication and leveraging technology to leverage voice for the authentication. So it's a very huge shift from the traditional KBA authentication. So some of the recommendations is like comprehensive assessments. So as we need to ensure we do evaluative security requirements, right? We need to ensure the privacy and security teams are involved and identify all the use cases and what are the challenges we are going to run into. At the same time, pilot program. So we need to go in a phased approach of deploying the capability. That does minimize the risk and resource commitments. And making sure the regulatory planning, engage all the legal and compliance experts to ensure the implementation meets the regulatory requirements. And some of the strategic planning is the phased rollout with appropriate resource and executive support. So that's where we need to be very good planning so that so that implementation will be smoother. If the planning is not good, we run into a lot of challenges during the implementation. So that's all related to this particular session. I hope this will be helpful for you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me on the LinkedIn. And thanks everyone. Thanks for giving me this opportunity.